Okay then, so here we go. So this is my obviously my intro slide. So we're going to be looking at what is it like to be part of a high performing team? What can you do about that? Is there anything we as leaders should consider when approaching team working? So in the session today, what we are going to look at is a couple of things. First of all, we're going to look at the difference between groups and teams. Why are they different? What makes a group? What makes a team? We're going to explore several models for team working and how to apply them in the real world. So, quite a lot of the time you'll read theories. This is about making the theories practical and actually using real life and real world examples on how we can build high performing teams. Looking at how we can pay attention to some of the emotional and social needs of individuals and actually social needs of teams, because there is an argument that teams are like tribes. So we can have a explore of that. And then finally, thinking of ways in which we can pay attention to communication and positivity, and how do you create a climate of positivity in a team. Okay, then, so let's think about the first bit. So groups versus teams then. So quite often these words are used interchangeably, but there are distinct differences between a group and a team. So for example, we don't have sports groups, we have sports teams, don't we? So what is the difference between a group and a sports group and a sports team, or a group of individuals and actually a team that's at the head of that? That's usually the main way you can tell that there is something else going on here. Groups have strong and clearly focused leadership, but teams actually have shared leadership. So every single person in that team is accountable for the things that they are doing. In groups, you share information, so you might get like an email or a WhatsApp group going on, but actually teams look after each other's performance. So every single action that gets undertaken, everybody has an impact on everybody. In groups, you often get individual accountability, whereas in team, it's a little different. So you have individual and mutual. Because of that symbiotic relationship between the members of the team, if one person does one thing, it definitely has an impact on the others. And then finally, groups often have people who turn up with random and often varied skills that you might not be able to sort of make sense of, whereas in teams you look at those skills and think, well, how can we use that to our advantage? What's the kind of what's our USP? What skills are we missing equally? And this is where the whole issue of diversity and inclusion comes in. So a really good team is able to take the diverse skills that come to it and put those into practice. So the main difference is that a team's strength or focus depends on the commonality of their purpose and how the individuals are connected to each other. A group can come from having a large number of people or a cohesive willingness to carry out a focused action. I think in our immediate vicinity, we have an example of that. So a chapter, for example, or a society, for example, might be a group. But the organizing team, the executive team in that group, might be the team that makes all the decisions. So there you have a real life example that you can use. In organizations, the organization is often the group, but then the individual teams are the bits of the organization that make things flow. So there you go. So what therefore is a team then? So let's have a think about that. Well, teams are interesting because usually or typically, I would say, they don't have more than 15 members. And the main reason behind that is communication and how much somebody is able to take on, how much the information the team can process at the same time to be able to deliver its objectives. And you can see the next point in there is that they have something in common, a shared objective that is really specific, and they can't get away from not working with each other. They have to work with each other to achieve those objectives. Team members have different and defined roles. So for example, you have somebody that looks after membership, somebody looks after administration, somebody looks after business, somebody looks after the alumni, and you have to cohere and complement each other to be able to deliver your purpose. And crucially, the team has an identity. So when I'm working with teams, it's not thinking about what can I do in my individual silo, it's what can we do as a collective. And actually, again, as a mindset, that is really important for you to think about. So when you're handing out or delegating tasks in your team, don't just think about what the person is going to do, is thinking about actually when they implement something, what impact is that going to have on the wider team. Okay, so to understand what good actually looks like, there's a model that I would like to share with you. This is called the 10 things fab teams do. So it's a model that's been described by a colleague of ours in health, and I think it resonates really neatly with some of the key concepts that go towards high-performing teams. So, for example, number one, creating a shared vision of the future together and moving towards it together. We're not talking about a group that makes things up as it goes along. We're talking about a real team ethos where you have an absolute end game. Number two, then, looking at challenging the status quo together. So you're not doing it in an isolated, singular way. You're doing it as a team. And actually, the purpose of that is so that none of you in teams have to face scary change alone. Number three, signing up to common goals, which means that actually any change that the team goes through is built upon commitment and a real desire for a different future, not day-to-day performance management. It's the big goals that we need to think about when we're working in teams. Number four, then, is about how you value and embrace difference. And from that difference will arise, obviously, healthy conflict, and how you go about dealing with healthy conflict. We'll get onto that in a little bit more detail later on. Number five, then, is helping everybody that's in the team feel safe and comfortable, and that way they can innovate, they can be themselves, they can approach problems in a very honest and open way. Number six is really crucial, which again we will talk a little bit more on later in the slides, which is communication, but actually genuine communication. Not an email isn't communicating. An email is sometimes passing the buck, getting things off your list. It's not my fault, governor, that kind of thing. So genuine communication is what we're looking for. Number seven is something that I think in the fraternity we're really good at, which is finding out the personal factors, personal issues around people. And what we mean by that is how do you really build those deep connections? And actually, this is where the brotherhood is really strong. This is where the brotherhood really helps, actually. So you can actually be genuine and kind to each other, but also if somebody can't do something, you know them well enough to be able to know why and how, and you can help them. And sometimes it can be something really little that somebody might not be willing to share with a stranger, or for example in a workplace. But if you're in the brotherhood like we are, you can share it. You say, look, I'm just not very confident at this, or I feel like I might not be good enough. Sometimes we do come across this it's called imposter syndrome, which again we can talk about in a bit more detail if needed. Number eight, it's thinking the best of each other. So it's basically that, fundamentally we are all good human beings and we're all trying to do our best, and all our intentions are positive. And actually, this is really important when something, goes wrong. Equally, when something goes right, it's usually the strength of the team that has made that thing go right. Number nine is, achieving a win-win for the team. So it's not just about individual ego-driven wins. This is about actually collective wins where everybody in the team has a role to play. And then when you put all of that together, you get to number 10, which is it's a highly productive, highly dynamic, sum is greater than its parts situation where one person isn't individually accountable. Everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction. So that is what the research that Horizons NHS have done, and I love the model because it kind of touches on all the different things that really good team working is based upon. Okay then, so the next thing I want to show you is a more practical way of looking at team working in a business or in an organization, and it's about how you can quickly measure it, and it's called the Lencioni model. So what is this? It's a pyramid, and you can see that at the bottom of the pyramid you've got absence of trust. So trust is about having confidence that your peer intent is good and that there is no need to be protective, and building that requires vulnerability. And we're talking about vulnerability-based trust. So, the ability to ask for help, or in a leadership context, saying things like, well, I don't know what to do next. that's what we're looking for as an outcome. Trust is something that is really hard to build and it takes time. Conflict, then, healthy conflict that inspires candid debate, but actually without any kind of fear of consequences, any kind of it's all based upon honesty and actually having that best person's the best intentions at heart. So you can see that there are things from the earlier model that I was describing that build into this. But actually, healthy conflict is about dealing with things in the moment, in the right way, in the right spirit. And if you are scared of conflict, then obviously there's work to do on trust. Third thing, then, the commitment piece. Commitment follows on from healthy conflict, where you hear all the views, you make decisions, you get buy-in, you get one voice, and sometimes there'll be winners and losers in the team where, okay, we've considered what you've got to say, but we can't go with that because, so at least you've considered it and you've paid account to it and you've paid attention to what they've got to say, but you're taking a particular decision. It's really important that, again, you focus on how to build commitment, but you can't get to commitment unless you really have it out and have a candid conversation and there's some sort of constructive conflict, and you can't get to conflict without trust. So commitment usually follows healthy conflict. It helps you build clarity on a situation. It helps to get the buy-in from the team. Sometimes you get people nodding heads in meetings and then going off and doing what they want to do. That's exactly what we don't want. And that happens in business, especially now. Accountability, then, is about your personal and collective standards as a team. So what do you actually stand for as a team? Who cares? Is there a willingness to call each other out on behavior and performance? If there is, then you've got it. If there isn't, then you've got work to do. Usually accountability takes place when somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it. And how you then go about bringing them up to speed or having a conversation with them is really crucial. So accountability is, again, it flows on from how we build that commitment, build the conflict, build the confidence in our teams to be able to call each other out, say, oh, by the way, you're going to do it that way, or oh, by the way, you were supposed to be there on time and you weren't. So it's that honest conversation. And guys, none of this is easy. None of this is easy, but it's an absolutely crucial skill to learn if you want to be successful as a team player. So when you put all of that together, you get remember the diagram that I was showing you earlier, that absolute focus on shared goals, shared outcomes, and actually you get delivery of results happening, which are not just individual, they're collective. And actually the feedback is for everybody in the team. So that's a model that I like to use a lot with teams, because it's practical, because it works at lots of different levels. So have a play with that. So in terms of significant characteristics that distinguish what is a true team from people working just in like little groups, here are some important pointers. Number one, people trust each other. They have each other's back. They know each other well enough to have those honest conversations, and that feelings can be expressed openly and in time. Conflict is worked through, conflict is expressed, conflict is addressed, people are listened to, but actually people support one another, and information is shared actively and freely. It's not held back by anyone. And then finally, the objectives of the team are agreed. So this is what we're going to do, guys. This is what we're going to do this week. While I disagree, you work all of that through, get that done. And then actually people are mutually accountable. Just to give you a flavor of what the opposite looks like then. When any of the following things are present, this can be a barrier to true team working. So not spending time together to plan and decide. So if there's probably 2 people that want to plan and decide, but the other 8 are not there, problem. You need to get as many people together as you can. And actually there's that mutual accountability piece, which is, look, we need to decide what we're doing here. Are you in or are you out of this team? Okay, if you're in, this is what we're going to do. Trust and openness are measured. Now, in teams where they measure that, it's because they're measuring things like loyalty, they're measuring attendance. It's not a genuine measure of team working. Actually, a measure of team working is what you do, the way you work. Information is given to people on a need-to-know basis, not shared freely. And the goals and objectives are either not there at all. So if you ask people in a team, so what I do is, so what's the team all about then? And one person says one thing and another person says another. That's not a team, is it? It's a group. Conflict is avoided. Now, again, you can probably have a reflection moment to yourself there. Do we deal with conflict in the right way in my team? Do we address it immediately? How do we address it? Who addresses it? Really important to point that out to you. So how do you go about making sure that those things are worked through in a timely manner? Feelings are ignored. This is a big one, actually, when we come to the social and emotional side of team working. If you ignore feelings, you build resentment. And the minute you start building resentment, boom, people go, people leave, people do things that you don't expect them to do. And almost you lose people for good people because you haven't really paid attention to what they need. Final piece is around competitive attitudes and ego-driven practices prevail. So basically, the most popular person wins. It's a team that is built on one personality. Heroic leadership, you could argue that is one aspect of heroic leadership, that if the heroic leader is having a bad day, the team is having a bad day. But actually in real team working, it's a consistent thing, and it's because it's not built on one person's wants and needs. And actually all of these things are habitual. These are things that you need to build time and time and time again. Okay, so hope all that has made sense for you so far. So this slide here is very much now looking at the neuroscience or the social aspects of how teams work. And this slide is very much about the research that's been done in that area. There is a podcast episode that I've linked, that I've dropped in there, which does a way better job than I do of explaining this, and it's definitely worth a listen. If you want to find out how, for example, tribes operate, for example, if that is something you want to, nerd out on, which I do on a regular basis, if I'm honest. And it's thinking about how you have to understand the social part of people's brains when thinking about team working. So the bit I covered earlier around emotions in teams, this builds on that. So the podcast and the work that I'm going to share with you talks about how important it is to be related. Building that sense of relatedness in teams. And there's an acronym which goes by the word Relish, RELISH, which I'll talk to you about in a bit more detail. So this research is about how do you create that affinity between people who you might not initially get a connection with. Again, really important from a diversity and inclusion perspective, where you don't want people who think the same way, look the same way, talk the same way. You want to bring in a bit of difference, but then once the different people are there, how do you include them? How do you build a group around them or with them? So this is really crucial for that. Again, the good teams, they don't avoid conflict, but they're comfortable with it, and actually getting there takes a lot of practice, actually. So, but we can do this. We've got the perfect way of trying this out in our fraternity, in our chapters. It talks about how resilience can be built in teams, and then the final point, I really love this, because again, you don't know until you get the research and the wisdom. You think, well, yeah, that is actually true, which is this. We think people want to be liked. Actually, they want to feel important. They want to feel that they can contribute something to your team. So what is it that you're doing that can help them realize what they're contributing? So the quote goes, we think people want to be liked. Actually, they need to be needed. Yeah. So through the neuroscience social element, when you look at teams, again, the same sort of stuff comes out. The fact that teams are collective, individuals are singular. Teams are more consistent, whereas individuals, because of their day-to-day moods and the fluctuations with moods, they're not going to be there, are they? They're going to be up and down, whereas teams are more constant. So this neuroscience research basically demonstrates that teams are more resilient than individuals, and furthermore, what they say is that individual resilience is linked to team resilience. So if you're in a really good team and you're having a bad day, you're more likely to bounce back from that because of the people around you, which again, it's really obvious stuff, isn't it? But good old science. This is rooted in evidence-based practice now, which is brilliant. I think the next slide I want to show you is all around resilience and how the resilience statements on the left can give you an idea around resilience as a whole. So the diagram on the left is some new research that's been carried out by the same person who developed the Fab Teams visual, and it brings together what I'm describing as workplace resilience statements that you can apply in any setting. But if you look at the individual level, and if you give people a sense of autonomy over the things that they can deliver, so if you give them a task and basically say, do it in the best way you can deliver it, then that gives them a level of fulfillment, and it makes them feel needed, which is what I said earlier on. At a team level, you can see that communication is critical. So if you're given the information that you need before you need to know it, that trust is increased. You feel that you feel more trusted or trusting in the team. And actually, if there is something about, again, teams taking risks, if you feel that you've got a trusted relationship in your team leader, whoever that might be, then you're more likely to follow them. And this is especially important now where, everything's up in the air. What do you do? How do you respond? Well, if you've got really good leaders and people around them who bring the best out in others, then there's a good chance that you'll be able to achieve something. So the team leader's role is to enable the team to be able to take some controlled risks, be creative, be innovative. So when thinking about the broader organization, so for those of us that are sort of in workplaces right now that are thinking about this kind of thing, you can see, again, what importance senior leaders have in creating an environment that is resilient. It cultivates that sort of resilient, positive culture, because if senior leaders are one step ahead, or if they are, if they do what they say they're going to do, and if they build trust, then the likelihood is you're going to be in an organization that is resilient and is going to have some good teams in it. So you can see some of the key skills that you need to build if you want to be if you have aspirations to be really good at building highly effective team. So just to summarize, those skills include sort of becoming well informed so that you're one step ahead of your competition, making sure that there's a really small gap between what you say you're going to do and what you're going to do. So that accountability gap is what we call it. And final piece is around how actually being really open and honest and vulnerable as a leader by saying, actually, sometimes I don't know how we're going to resolve this, and bringing people around you to solve a problem that you might not be able to solve individually. So we were talking about the Relish model earlier. I thought actually this is probably a really good place to put it. So the model talks about the 6 needs of the social brain that drive your individual and team performance and organizational performance. And the leadership challenge within what we're talking about here is, how do you lead people through this sort of model, and actually to be aware of it, and actually to be able to use or talk to some of it. So we've talked about relatedness already, which is about actually what is shared between the group. So for example, today we're on this a session, what is common to us all is that we're part of a fraternity, we're part of Alpha Kappa Psi. I might be in the UK, you guys might be spread all around the world, but that's the one unifying thing that, we can all relate to. Relatedness also talks about, from a social perspective, it's the dynamics in a team. And what we mean by that is that what are the stories that hold that team together? So for example, there's some of the assumed things that you come across. So subconscious, unconscious things like, who's in control? How do decisions get made? How do we decide to spend our time? Some of those things are often organized and sorted out informally. And that is also part of relatedness. So how do you relate to not just the people, but the way in which the team goes about making its decisions? And anytime that is disrupted, it can lead to some negativity, because quite often those things are taken for granted, they're assumed. And also, I think when you think about really, really good teams, those unconscious things are almost more out in the open. They're more, understood by the team, so that they know how to get things done. They know how to work with each other. Yeah, do you see where I'm going with that? Expression then, which is, we were talking about psychological safety a little bit earlier. It's a bit more than psychological safety. It's about how people can express what they really think to their colleagues. And again, the research, if you listen to the podcast, talks about the fact that when people don't express themselves, when they hold it in, they actually become diagnosably more stupid, which I thought, well, I had to listen to that a few times, thinking, well, what does that mean then? But what it actually means is that because they can't express their idea, they can't chime in with the team, that they're going to lose that thread of thought that they had, and that's where some of the best ideas can often get lost. Leadership, really obvious. It's about leaders having the necessary skill, but also the acuity, the ability to see these things in a way that they need to see, so that they can manage and lead the social elements of a group. I is the interpersonal connection. So I in the Relish model means that actually the interpersonal connection, I'm going around a little bit here, I'm just going to try and summarize this in one sentence. It's the power of story. That's what it is in the group. So stories are really important in social groups, in social settings, because stories become those unwritten rules that I was talking about earlier on in relatedness. So what is the story of that person? What is the story of that situation? What is the story of our team? And actually all those stories become the way that we do things around here, which is another way of saying culture. So the interpersonal connection is really key to think about, especially when you're bringing new people into your chapter, for example, or into your team. Is thinking about how you describe the story. And usually what the research they're finding is, and remember, they're putting people into neuro machines, where they're looking at how their brains are firing off neurons as certain things are being displayed to them. The most emotionally triggering stories are the ones that make it into the cultural story. So you've got to make your story really strong for it to get into the cultural story of the team. So again, important learning for us to consider. Seeing progress then. So this is where, again, really good teams are able to almost get through things. So there's two different paradigms at work here, not paradigms, two extremes. Extreme number one is a breakdown. So you get a breakdown in communication, a breakdown in relationships between team members. On the flip side, you get breakthroughs. And again, as a team, are you heading for a breakdown? Are you heading for a breakthrough? The way you get to a breakthrough is the team holds this concept again called the dynamic tension, which is actually, leaders holding their nerve. Okay, I know that decision is difficult, but I think it's the right decision for the team, and holding their nerve so that all team members can process that and reach that conclusion either themselves, or if they don't, they leave the team. Sometimes that does happen. We're not talking happy, harmonious things there. We're talking really difficult situations that teams have to manage. So how do you create that dynamic tension in your team? How do you avoid a breakdown in relationships? Is you pay attention to some of the other things I've spoken about today, especially that piece around trust and getting to know people and getting them to conflict in the right way. Final piece is around hope. So, what we mean by hope in this model is actually what is the kind of teamwork we need to do to get this job done. So, it might be really high energy. It might be really focused. It might be whatever it needs to be, basically, that you as a team decide what is the type of teamwork we need to be able to do to deliver a piece of work, sorry. In some cases, it might be that we need to be really high energy and not high conflict, but you might find that you need to be in a really different place to get that job done. So again, important to pay attention to that. One of the things that I want to draw out from that last model is this element around psychological safety. So, as leaders, our job is to help create a space in our team for what is called self-regulation, where people can express what they're going to say. It's about giving them a container to express things into. One of the favorite sayings that I've heard is something that a colleague of mine says, which is, this is something that is, I believe in this strongly, but it's loosely held unless somebody can actually persuade me that this is the right thing to do. So that, again, there's ways in which we can actually get that work done. And emotions, we were talking about emotions earlier. Emotional energy in a team, again, is really important. So let's spend a minute or so talking about this and thinking about this. And Going back to the Lencioni model, it's thinking about when are we in the performance zone. A performance zone is when we're being really positive and it's high energy and it's really good, and you can't sustain that for a long time as an individual or a team. It's important to go down into the low energy zone, which can be positive because you're in a recovery. You might watch Netflix, you might, I don't know, eat a kebab or a pizza or whatever, but actually getting yourself into that recovery zone so that you can amp yourself up for another bout of performance. Positive energy is really crucial in this. When the energy is negative, you end up in those two zones there. So first of all, there's that survival zone. It's getting from day to day to day to day to day to day. It's not going to be sustainable. It's finding a way of getting into the positive zone. And then the last one at the bottom left is the burnout zone. So, if you're low energy and you're, negative, you're going to burn yourselves out. Now, the reason that I'm showing you this, and again, there's a link there, is about how important it is to know this. It's about the knowledge and how you apply the knowledge. So, for example, if you know that you've got a load of people who are in the burnout zone, create some recovery for them. Create, like, I don't know, a virtual hangout. Find out what it is that's going to get them there. What is positive, and create that space for them. If people are turning up to sessions or meetings or gatherings with overly negative stories, then again, that's a problem. They will take the rest of the group or the team into the negative energy zone. So again, it's really important to pay attention to that. The criticality of communication is key to all of this. And there's a line that I like to show my teams, which is, again, as leaders, we need to be so mindful about how much what we're focusing on when we're communicating with our team. So this diagram shows you that actually for every one negative story, how many positive stories do you need to be able to balance the energy out of that team? So if you remember the diagram earlier, what's going to take people between the positive and the negative energy zones? The ratio that it's showing here, and this is based on research again that I've been looking into, is actually it's over 4, over 3, 2.9013 is the ratio. So for every one rubbish story that is told, you need at least 2.9 for that to create a balance. If you don't, then creativity dies, relationships break down. You don't get breakthroughs, you get breakdowns happening. Productivity goes down the toilet. Whereas anything over 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the magic number. 6 is where a team can flourish, creativity thrives, relationships are enhanced, people are genuinely well. That resilience that we were talking about earlier, that individual and team resilience is happening. People feel that they're in the flow, they're doing their best work, they're loyal, they're involved. So again, as leaders, it's important that we pay attention to the power of story and which stories we give energy to, because we can give energy to whichever stories we think are the ones that need energy, and which stories we almost don't, or I'm not saying ignore them, acknowledge them, but don't give them energy. Give the energy to the stories that are going to get you to your goal. So again, something for you to think about. Thinking about COVID, wondering, I've got a few questions there just to pose to you while you're processing, and I am mindful that there's a lot here for you to think about. Are most of our communications during COVID positive, negative? What do we think about that? Is the language that we use with our members, our brothers, various other people, are they overtly negative, positive? Are we scaremongering, or are we reassuring? What mindset do you engender when you begin or manage your online meetings? So if you're doing something together, how do you start that meeting? How do you cultivate a sense of positivity, or even, how do you manage that balance that I'm just showing you there? To what extent are you communicating on what's going really well versus what you're finding challenging? So there's some questions to think about there. If anyone wants to read up on this, there's an article about this particular piece by Barbara Fredrickson and Marcial Losada, who wrote this piece. And again, they looked at what the difference was between people who are flourishing and people who are languishing. So the 6-to-1 ratio obviously works with teams, and in marriages, for example, I think it's something like 10-to-1. So you can see that there are relationships between, this work and actually other kind of social work that takes place. But as again, leaders that are, you know, again, you've taken the time out to come and listen to me today and listen to me for quite a while. And I know I've been through a lot. It's thinking about how you can balance what is called traditional thinking mindset with what we're calling modern or forward thinking mindset. And it works at these sort of 5 levels. So what is your belief? What is the impact that your belief has? What is the style that then engenders? So how do you then go about working in a team? What is the behavior that then comes out as a result of that? But underneath all of that, what is the root cause of that behavior? So if you are somebody who is more traditionally orientated, you might have a belief that everything should be perfect and that you should have all the answers. In that case, that there is a higher probability that your impact will be you'll just get things done your way. You won't ask, you won't share feedback, you won't ask for help. So that'll be your impact. Style wise, it might be that, you know, you start leading by instruction, that you don't delegate. Behaviorally, that is seen as paternalistic, command and control, resistance to change, and defensive. And actually, the root cause of all of that is, oh, I don't want to fail, or I don't want to take any risks, I don't want to get anything wrong. That is something that has been learned by a lot of our, what I would call, traditional managers, and getting them to balance that can often be tricky, because what we're asking them to do is quite different. What we're actually asking them to do is to believe in themselves, believe it or not, and cultivate a desire for learning and growth, and actually a desire to basically try new things. And you know, you can see the behaviors that are sort of listed on the right hand side, but because, you know, ultimately there is a belief that, you know, they want to learn, they want to do better, they want to grow. They're okay with saying I don't know. They're okay with asking their people for support. They're okay with trust-based vulnerability. So can you see where this is linking back to what I said right at the beginning? If you're able to build trust as a leader, if you're able to ask for support and advice, then guess what? You're more likely to create environments where team working happens. In terms of behaviorally, good listener, you know, asking great questions, being open, being honest, being sincere. So those are what we're calling the new leadership behavior. That's not really new, they're obvious, to be honest. We called them new like 10, 15 years ago, when, you know, the people that were behind this research were writing this. I think that is now not new, it's essential. So you need a balance between being able to manage risk, but actually having an inner confidence for growth. Okay, so I've been talking for a long time here, and I'm sure you've got questions for me. I really would like some feedback from you, which is you can give that feedback to me by taking your mobile phone out and scanning that QR code, which will take you through to a page where you'll be asked a couple of questions about how the session went for you, what you learned, what you're going to take away. I'm going to end with a bit of Carol Dweck, which is actually, we need to embody what is called a growth mindset. Team working is something that is often taken for granted, and it is based on, you know, where you might have come from in your career or your family background, or for whatever reason you might not have come across it. So I think please approach this whole area and agenda with an open mind and with a growth mindset. Because actually, as Carol says, becoming a great team worker and becoming a fantastic high-performing team is better than being one. And being is actually a fixed mindset approach. And again, Carol is somebody that I value really highly, so please read up on her. So I've been Kash Haroon. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you've picked up some useful information from the session today.